Russia says their focus is now on the east, but this is Odesa in the south. Missile strikes today killed at least 5 people, including a 3-month-old baby, according to the Ukrainians. Kyiv said they expect Russian attacks to intensify this Orthodox Easter weekend. They said Moscow's aim was one of terror. Mariupol knows all about terror. The now customary drone shots show what the Kremlin calls the liberation of this city. And the Russians continue to pummel the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol, despite Putin's televised orders on Thursday to siege rather than attack. Down in the bowels of the factory, the last patch of Ukrainian resistance, the word "Diti," children, is written on the walls. Vladimir Putin said he didn't even want a fly to escape this place. So what hope for these families who claim to have sheltered here for 2 months?
Я знаходжуся на комбінаті Азовсталі у бомбосховищі зі своєю родиною вже з 25 лютого. Це понад 1,5 місяці. Ми знаходимося тут і ми потребуємо допомоги, оскільки ми не можемо знаходимося в епіцентрі подій і не можемо вийти з них.
This footage from Thursday was filmed by soldiers from the Azov regiment, a once militia group with openly fascist roots, a useful propaganda tool for Vladimir Putin to justify his so-called war of denazification. They are now part of Ukraine's National Guard, but the footage was released with the Azov logo. Kyiv denies the soldiers have any neo-Nazi links. The war has seen them flooded with volunteers. War, where children make baskets in darkened basements as they dream of daylight.
Берите нас отсюда. Мы хотим видеть мирное небо. Мы хотим дышать свежим воздухом. Вы просто не представляете, что для нас сейчас значит покушать, выпить сладкого чая. Для нас это уже счастье.
But they don't breathe fresh air outside, just inhale smoke. Civilian evacuations were meant to take place today. Russia and Ukraine blamed each other for it not going ahead. What hope for those left behind? More satellite images show what appear to be newly dug trenches in a cemetery east of the city, the second mass grave site revealed in the area in the past few days. Moscow continues to conduct attacks on the front line in Luhansk and Donetsk. And Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city, is now partially blocked and under constant shelling.
Ужасная жизнь. Надо ехать, а куда? Животные держат. Все время надеялась. Вот надежда, вот, наверное, умирает последняя. Сегодня, наверное, она умрет окончательно.
Надеемся на помощь друзей.
Да каких друзей, ладно, что вы? Какую помощь, какая? На чью вы помощь?
Европейских друзей.
А что они сделали?
Ракеты такие же ракеты, такое же оружие.
President Zelensky today spoke with Boris Johnson about a new phase of military aid. And the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres plans to meet Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to call for an end to the fighting. But neither side is likely to come to the table. Both Kyiv and Moscow are waiting to see what happens with this next phase, whether Ukrainian resistance can once again defy the odds, or whether Mariupol's fate is repeated across the Donbas.
And Kieran joins me now. Kieran, now Russia have resumed attacks on the steelworks. Have they made any gains in this war, do you think?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that, Russia says that this second phase is all about Donetsk and Luhansk in the east. That's what they're saying. And, uniting that with Mariupol, which they are hoping to finally claim and then connect up to the Crimea. But as we've seen in practice, that's not really happening because they're focused on Kharkiv. 3 people killed. There are reports of an attack in Dnipro and then in Odesa. Now, the Russians say in Odesa they were attacking a weapons depot. Odesa was, of course, close to Moldova, and Moldova there is an area of Russian-occupied land by separatists, Transnistria, which they mooted earlier in the week that they might go for. I think the key thing here is that this new phase of the Russian invasion, it is here, it has begun, and it's intensifying. And so what do the Ukrainians do? On the one hand, there's defence. Boris Johnson said that we're going to send the UK more defensive military aid there. On the other hand, what about peace talks? We haven't talked about those in a while. And President Zelensky, he just now was doing a Q&A in a metro station, and he was asked about any potential peace talks and coming to the table with Vladimir Putin. Here's what he said.
I've insisted since the very beginning to have negotiations with the leader of the Russian Federation because I consider that any formats of the meetings through the mediators with Russia, or just to giving this or that information to the leader of Russian Federation through the friendly countries, will not give the desired effect. I consider this war can be stopped by the one who began it.
So all eyes are on next week when President Zelensky there, he will be meeting the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, and Vladimir Putin separately will also be meeting the UN Secretary-General. So all eyes are on those talks.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Kieran Moodley reporting. Now, President Zelensky has held talks with Prime Minister Boris Johnson this afternoon and discussed a new phase of military aid, including the provision of heavy weapons like protected mobility vehicles, drones and anti-tank weapons. Earlier, I spoke to Conservative MP Bob Seeley, and I began by asking him if he believed the UK has been delivering enough military aid to Ukraine so far.
I don't think it is enough. I was in Odesa and Mykolaiv last week, and both the Southern Front commanders and the governors were saying that they completely understand why all the kit, all the military equipment that's flowing from the West, almost all of it goes east. If the Ukrainians are going to have a strong hand in the eventual negotiating phase, they need to be pushing the Russians back. And that means not only defending the Eastern Front, but it probably means opening up a second front in the south to threaten the Russian land corridor and to seize the area of land around potentially Kherson, moving up to Berdyansk on that bit of the north side of the Black Sea.
What type of weaponry support should we be giving to Ukraine right now?
I think that is an incredibly important question. And over above the air defense, the tanks and the infantry fighting vehicles and all the ammunition, there is a critical argument now about Ukraine moving to a different size of ammunition. And although that sounds quite technical, it's actually fundamental to the tactics of this war. If they move to NATO standard 155 artillery shell, which big artillery shells, rather than the Soviet sort of Russian caliber 152, all things considered, that gives the Ukrainians longer range. And it means they can just hit Russian artillery and Russians can't hit them back. And if you are doing that, the Russians either have to get close, so they're continually trying to get closer to you, but you can always just stay out of their range, or they have to come up really close. So potentially, if we supply, as the Americans are starting to do, if we supply the Ukrainians with 155 spec, NATO spec, it means that they may force the Russians to change tactics. And that could potentially change the course of the war, as well as potentially saving the lives of thousands of Ukrainians who are trapped in cities, and those cities are now being shelled from artillery positions.
Should we be aiming for a Ukrainian victory or just to push the Russians back at this stage?
We should be under no illusion. Once the Russians are interested in swallowing up the whole of Ukraine and destroying its government, its pro-Western government. But for the near term, what they want is the Donbas, and they want, looking at a map, the right-hand side of the northern side of the Black Sea. That's one area of land they call Novorossiya. But they also want all that land, that Novorossiya, the north side of the Black Sea, all the way over to Odesa, and to this slither of territory called Transnistria, and probably threatening Moldova and wanting Moldova back, or at least chunks of Moldova back within it as well.
Sure. You mentioned Moldova. Do you think that there is a real threat now to them?
There is a threat to Moldova, and specifically to that slither of land called Transnistria, which is a very sort of pro-Soviet, pro-Moscow area that has about 3 battalions of either pro-Russian or Russian troops on it. That is another potential land threat to Odesa, aligned with other potential threats, such as an amphibious landing.
Bob Seeley, while I have you, I just wanted to ask about Downing Street saying that Boris Johnson has not received a fine, but we know that number 10 officials have. What is your stance on this? Are you still backing the Prime Minister?
Backing him, certainly. I mean, look, we haven't seen the final Sue Gray report. We don't know what's happening with other fines. So I want to wait and see what's happening. it's a horrible distraction, but it is also, I'm afraid to say, proof that we should never have had these dreadful, cruel and arbitrary and draconian laws in the first place. And I wish government had been wiser, both about itself, but also about human nature. And maybe when we had the COVID restrictions, we would have gone a lot more with the grain of what people wanted. I've had so many people say to me with understandable, genuine anger, I couldn't see my granny in the old folks' home before she died. I couldn't go to her funeral. These were really stupid laws, which we should never have been put in place. I voted against some of them sometimes. I wish I voted against more of them.
Sure, and Steve Baker, one of your colleagues, has also said similar, but he's criticised Cabinet today in The Telegraph and said that they should be doing more. Shouldn't they be doing more right now? Isn't Boris Johnson's leadership now possibly up for debate? Lots of people have talked about Ukraine being the reason why he can't go, but leaders have gone in wars before, Thatcher being one of them. So that's not really an excuse, is it?
No, look, leaders go in wars, and we are not at war ourselves. And in the run-up to the Gulf War, we replaced Mrs. Thatcher to John Major, so that's not a great argument. What I do think is quite a strong argument is that one should wait to see what these reviews are going to say. We are going to have the Privileges Committee look into this. Let's see what they say. Let's have the full Sugre report, and let's see what these things say before we judge. I do think we need to have all the evidence out there. I do think that is fair, and I do think when the government says that, they have a decent and frankly a powerful argument.
OK, Bob Seeley, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. And just a clarification, Boris Johnson has paid a fine for attending a birthday party at Downing Street. Today, Downing Street said he had not been issued with any more